I want to kick it off. Trump was on Hugh Hewitt this morning. And Hugh tweeted out something that I thought was fascinating because I want to get to what Trump said about immigration in just a second. But after the interview, Hugh Hewitt put out a tweet and he said, President-elect Trump is the best interview on the planet because he always tells the interview exactly what's on his mind. Legacy media reacts to are focused on his comments to me on the Dreamers, which we're going to get to in a second. But the most important part of the conversation was President-elect's focus on shipbuilding. He knows our Navy needs resources, starting with ships and subs. And Caroline, I thought what was fascinating is that issue doesn't get a ton of attention. But to me, it showed where President Trump's head is, that we have a threat from China and we are not ready to face it. Our military, our Navy is not where it needs to be. And yet President Trump immediately went to how we combat this, talking about rebuilding our Navy, getting us above 300 ships, which we're sorely below. And I thought that was a very telling statement. I thought Hugh was so right in calling that out as the big takeaway.
Absolutely. And I think Trump recognizes that we need to signal naval prowess in the South China Sea, as you mentioned, as we enter this new era of geopolitics where China very much is an adversary and we're trying to just be deterrent. You know, deterrent is important. And naval ships, I actually have my family has a small cabin in a more rural part of Maine, right along the coast, where there's a massive shipbuilding plant. And I've seen firsthand these destroyers. And, you know, the production, I think, is still pretty high, but safe to say that our military armaments and equipment, as well as just vessels, I think have been depleted. And I think generally it's understood that we're kind of lagging in terms of like competitive, ships. And so hopefully with China, with Trump now at the helm, we will be competitive once more.
Bradley, the thing that I thought was fascinating about what Hugh was saying is that the media never focuses on they always focus on the shiny nickel. But we've lost the defense industrial base of shipbuilding. We talked over the last couple of weeks about the fact that we don't have the munitions we need anymore. We've given it all to Ukraine and we can't build it back enough. We're having this huge debate about Nippon Steel. Like the stuff that made us great, the manufacturing, we've sort of let wither on the vine. And Trump is basically signaling now we need to get these bases back of industrial might.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And Trump has always been the wonderful, least eloquent advocate for common sense sometimes. And I said least eloquent because sometimes he just hits you over the head with it, whether it's the media or whether it's his own base or whether it's the rest of the Republican Party who wants to focus on, high-tech fighters or new drone technology. He just comes in and says, immigration, we want to stop it. Let's build a wall. And everyone says, what? A wall? That's not going to work.
Right.
Well, walls have worked for thousands of years.
You can't do it because it's never been done before, but yet here we are.
Because it's never been done, yes. And the same thing can be applied to the military, right? Navy ships. We need more Navy ships. You want to make sure that the United States is in a place to protect its interests at home and abroad. You're going to need the hard power to do so. And that's why Trump is so right on this issue. I will say the one thing that I might have a degree of separation with the president is we don't know how conventional naval power is actually going to work in the South China Sea. When we've wargamed that scenario where, let's say, China makes a move on Taiwan and we decide that we're going to commit more assets to the region, more naval assets to the region in South China Sea, well, it doesn't necessarily bode well for our conventional Navy that's still operating off of, late World War II, post-World War II naval paradigms. I think what Trump wants to do with shaking up the bureaucracy is pair that reinvestment in not only our military, but in the American industrial base with a reorientation of the priorities of the United States military and the strategies of the United States military. Colin Powell, when he started out, shockingly enough, wanted to bring this about, and he was kind of swallowed by the Bush administration and some of the lies peddled there. And ultimately ended up in the wars on terror, etc. I think Trump now, he's fired a bunch of neocons in the past 7 years that he's been in the public square. He's putting together a foreign policy team that has all these different elements of the right-wing coalition that got him elected. And I think he's actually going to be able to reorient American foreign policy effectively if he gets his nominees through.
Steve Cortes, Hugh was right that a lot of the focus was on the Dreamer. So let's talk about that. I am concerned about some of the comments that are made about cutting deals, right? I believe that Republicans control the process right now. We've got the presidency, the two houses of Congress. If we're going to solve immigration, then let's do it now. Let's have a strong border security bill. Let's do things that make sense. But I think that I am concerned that too many Republicans want to cut a deal, so to speak, with Democrats. So what do you think the deal has to be with, when President Trump says we need to deal with the Dreamers, what do you think we need to do and how?
Sure. Sean, when it comes to politics, I always think that we can learn quite a lot from The Godfather, from the movie. And remember the scene where Frankie Pentangeli says, let's hit him now while we still got the muscle?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we got the muscle right now. Okay. So there is no reason for us to be making moderate compromises when it comes to immigration. And by the way, that's not just because of what we want to do, it's what the American people want, because President Trump could not have been more explicit and more adamant during his campaign that he intended to secure the border and mass deportations. And with those issues front and center, he swept every single swing state and won the popular vote. That does not mean that we're now supposed to get soft and milquetoast in Washington, D.C. Regarding the Dreamers specifically, and by the way, I don't like to use that phrase, even though I just did, because of course, American citizens have dreams as well. But regarding these DACA adults, okay, and they're adults, they're not children. Regarding these DACA adults who were brought here as children, I will concede that they are a different category of illegal migrants because they themselves did not make the adult choice to trespass into our country. And so I do think they should be dealt with differently. But should they be offered citizenship? Absolutely not. No. If we give them citizenship, we are incentivizing more of this kind of trafficking of children illegally across our border.
Let me throw my idea at you, Steve, because I agree with you 100%. These people, it's one thing if you break the law and you want to be rewarded, no bueno, right? Here's what I think. What if we cut a deal right now to say, okay, you came into this country because somebody else brought you in. You're living in the shadows. You can't be as productive and open, right? So here's the deal. We'll let you stay. You get a permanent green card, but you cannot get citizenship. Yeah. If you don't want to leave, which you can stay, but you agree, you make some kind of, signed agreement that you get to stay in the country, have a green card, come out of the shadows, but you're trading that for saying, but I'm not going to be a citizen. I think we should cut that deal now so that they don't have to, the Democrats say, hey, this is the best deal they're going to get. They become open but is that, all right, so let me just bounce it off you. What do you think?
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Again, I think this is the only category, though, where we should be that generous, right? In other words, every other illegal migrant in the United States needs to be deported. That needs to happen. But for this category of DACA adults, people who did not choose to come here as adults, who were brought here as children, I think offering them legal status, but not citizenship makes a lot of sense. If we give them a path to citizenship, unfortunately, what we will then do is incentivize much more of this kind of activity where we effectively turn children into almost an admission token into the United States for traffickers, for illegal migrants, and that has to stop. So we need to have mass deportations. This is no time for Republicans in the Congress, and a lot of them want to go soft. Again, remember the words of Frankie Pentangeli, let's hit him now while we still got the muscle. And right now, we have the muscle.
I agree. Caroline, over the break, there was this feud, if you want to call it, again, maybe that's not the right word, about H1B visas. Elon Musk gets out there and says we need H1B visas. These are these high-tech skilled visas for people to come into the country and work for tech companies, basically. And then you had Steve Bannon and others say, no way. This is this is indentured servitude. These people come over, they get stuck working at a company. If they leave or say anything, they get deported. This is no way to live. Plus, we're selling out American workers. I put this poll out on Twitter. Okay, I do this from time to time. I've never seen a response like this in my life. Over 92,000 people voted in 48 hours. 67-33 saying no H1B visas. I was shocked about the intensity and the comments. I think this is going to be a really interesting issue because I didn't see this thing coming.
Sean, it is one of the worst cliches in Republican politics that illegal immigration is bad, but legal immigration is by default inherently good. It's just not true. And I know that we have this new Republican coalition that includes the tech moguls in Silicon Valley, the Elon Musks and the David Sacks, and we have to respect that they were part of Trump's victory group. But there's also the traditional GOP Trumper base that very much feels like globalization and like outsourcing and all of those things is what kind of disarmed them as American citizens. And that's why Trump's populism gained steam in the beginning, even before 2016. And look, libertarians will say, well, they think we're an economic zone, even though we are a country with customs and traditions and a collective credo, a common language. There are so many things that America is that's beyond just a GDP generation area. And they'll say, oh, we're missing out on millions and millions of dollars of consumer benefits and GDP if we don't import and recruit these highly skilled employees from China and India. Well, actually, we have a surplus of highly skilled STEM graduates in this country as it is. In 2022, we had 17 million Americans graduate with STEM degrees. We only have about 8 million filled. So what does that tell you? We don't have a STEM shortage like the advocates of H1B expansion will tell you. We have plenty at our disposal. They're just in this like dormant state and they've chosen other career paths and we have to reactivate and re-engage them. And I think the reason why they never pursued STEM is because wages in STEM have stagnated, Sean. And basic supply and demand will tell you the reason for that is because there's too much supply, and that's artificially coming from abroad. H1B recipients flooded the market, and they basically drove wages not down, but they're really not increasing at the level they should be if the H1B program or if STEM workers were in such high demand. It's just not true.
Bradley, do you guys at the Daily Signal, when I honestly was taken back by the intensity of the no H1B visas, the Steve Bannon position on this. I thought it would get mixed up, but 67-33, that was shocking to me. I did not see that flip-flopped, that level of disparity in the thought there.
I'm so glad that we're talking about this issue, Sean, because on the day of the election, when we were running through our election coverage, I said, listen, this coalition, if we win today, is going to be in control for at least the next 2 years, and there are tons of fault lines that they could step on. Let's say the coalition at the top, the elite level of the coalition, is made up of, you can say, Christian intellectuals, whether they're Catholic or Protestant, right? You think of like the Christian Nationalism Project or other Catholic thinkers who say essentially that we have this comprehensive view of the human person that isn't being held up in the United States of America, and therefore the American dream is becoming less accessible to the American people and to each individual American family. When those avenues are closed off, it's government's responsibility to reopen them, especially if government was the one who closed them in the first place. Then the other side of the coalition are the tech bros. Elon Musk wants to put chips in people's brains. Don't take my word for it. He said it himself. This is not a group that has the same view of the human person as, say, like that traditional Christian tradition that we see on the right. And so this was the most clear booby trap for this coalition to walk into early. H-1B visas. Because so many people are coming from the tech world, H-1B visas are a way to get cheap foreign labor, just as Caroline was talking about. And oftentimes, they're not actually fulfilling the role of chief engineer, chief software engineer. They're more lower level than you would think. They're not actually skilled laborers in many ways. So the other interesting dynamic here is whenever you push someone like a Vivek or someone like a Elon on this question, they retreat to, well, don't you think we should be taking all the world's geniuses and bringing them to the greatest country of all time, and then we can, outcompete China or reinvigorate the American domestic manufacturing industries, and therefore, cause this rising tide will raise all boats. Listen, if we want to say that H-1B visas are for the uber gifted, right? People with like 130 plus IQ. That's less than 2% of the world's population. That's less than half of the total population of the United States in the entire world. And so a lot of these people, because they are so intelligent and because they are well educated, they are already comfortable and wealthy in their own countries, not to mention whether or not they share our values. And so if you wanted to square the circle between the H1B visa folks on the tech side and the Trump base that says no, unfettered immigration, whether it was low skill or high skill, is what led to the current economic conditions of the country. Well, realistically, you should have H-1B visas sitting at about 1,000 super geniuses per year. But that's never what these tech folks say. They always say they want to bring in more skilled labor, and that ultimately helps their corporations' bottom lines. And so I think if you wanted to negotiate a deal here, you're going to actually increased threshold for what counts as skilled labor in the modern economy while radically reducing the number of H-1Bs that we hand out per year. That way, the tech people can, as they say, get their super geniuses while the American people's interests are protected in the working middle and upper middle class.
You know, Bradley,
I just wanted to add, we already have a visa for individuals with extraordinary ability. It's called the O1 visa. We already have, and there's another category on top of that. So we don't even need H-1B. H-1B has always been kind of a facade to really get cheap laborers imported into this country to help these companies' bottom line, as Bradley just said.
No, that's exactly correct. And Bradley, I'm also glad, though, that you talked about making sure that legal immigrants to the United States share our values. That's critical, too. It's not just how skilled or how smart they are. For example, now this is an extreme example, but I think it's relevant. The 9/11 hijackers came to the United States legally, and Mohammed Atta, their leader, had a graduate degree in STEM from Europe. So he was highly skilled and also highly hateful and caused unbelievable damage, clearly, to this country. Now, again, that's an extreme example. But the point here is we want people coming to this country who both bring a skill set but also love our values. Because, to Caroline's point earlier, we're not just an economic machine. We're not a company. We are a country, and in many ways, a country should operate like a family. And if you don't buy into the values of the family, then you have no business coming here. We shouldn't be inviting you. I think, by the way, the best way to try to reach a compromise, look, if it were up to me, if I were the monarch, I would just say no worker visas, period. As a matter of fact, I think we need a legal immigration moratorium. I think we need to take a complete pause. I don't think that's practical, though, right now, given the politics of Washington. So I think the best compromise where we can tell the tech crowd and the pro-business crowd that you can still get your geniuses, and I wrote an article about this at Real Clear Politics, is to establish a minimum salary that is very high. My minimum salary would be at least $250,000 per year. The reason I chose that number is that's a little more than 3 times the median household income in America, which is $80,000 according to the Census Bureau. In addition to that, a $50,000 fee, effectively a fine, or if you will, a tariff on human capital that would be paid to the government. So if a company wants to pay $50,000 to the government, $250,000 to the worker who's going to come over, then we will at least ensure, okay, they're bringing over a surgeon who has unique talents and talents that perhaps we can't find in our region of the United States. Then we will know that we're bringing in the actual superstars that are talked about in promoting H1B. But let's make that a reality by establishing a really, really high minimum. To me, that would be a sensible compromise place. And by the way, Elon Musk himself stated as such. Now, he didn't name an amount, but in one of his many posts on this issue, he said, we want the 0.1% and we should have a high minimum salary. Well, let's take him at his word and let's do that.
Can I add one more thing here,
Yeah.
Sean? So Steve is exactly right on this. If you set an excise wage through government policy for these people coming in, right, they're not undercutting the wages of workers here in the United States. So increasing the cost for corporations to bring in high-skilled labor and then cultivate them is actually makes them think about what does this employee look like for us 5, 10, 15 years down the road. The other thing, he cited the extreme example of Atta in the 9/11 terrorist attacks. This is something that we don't talk about at all, that actually elite migrants are more resistant to assimilation than working class migrants. Let's think of the history of the United States here. A lot of folks that were coming from Europe over the course of the 19th and 20th century were working class individuals that were, in order to provide for their families, constantly thrown into the American body politic and had to assimilate. If you come here with resources, and if you come here from a completely different culture, you can insulate yourself in a way that immigrants previously could not. They are more resistant to assimilation, and therefore it's not going to ultimately benefit, the development of those values. Even if they do believe in meritocracy, they could believe in a very different type of meritocracy. And so even if they can't inculcate the values before they come over, it's much more likely a working class migrant takes on the values of an American citizen than an elite migrant.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.